got polling from CBS News, new polling with warning signs for President Biden as the campaign season deepens. Former President Donald Trump leading President Biden among likely voters, 52 to 48%. Also, 45% of registered voters rate Biden's presidency so far as poor, and just 38% give Trump's time in office that very same rating.
The electoral polling has not been looking good for President Joe Biden, and that is the latest from CBS News and its findings from over the weekend. Now, Joe Biden is obviously a vulnerable candidate, especially up against Donald Trump, who has been increasing his support among some of the individuals who actually ended up voting for Biden in 2020. So I'll get into some of the details on that in just a moment. But multiple outlets have predicted for a while now that Biden is very likely to lose, and polls show that Trump is holding leads outside of the margin of error in these polls, which is really important to pay close attention to in regard to the methodology of the polls, what the margin of error happens to be, and whether or not the results are within or outside the margin of error. In this case, we're talking about Trump holding a lead outside the margin of error. Now, New York Times' polling looks even worse for Joe Biden, especially when you compare it to CBS, and the CBS poll already looks bad. So let's get into the details on that. So over the weekend, on Saturday, the New York Times reported that polls show Biden trailing in states worth well over 270 electoral votes, and he lags Trump in the newest New York Times Siena College national poll by 5 percentage points among registered voters, 48% to 43%. That's the largest lead Trump has ever had in a Times Siena national poll. So remember, we've been repeating that Biden would have to win nationally by 5 points in order to clinch victory.
We might have millions of people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker, because we just need 1% of our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now.
It is now replicated in many polls that Trump has a lead over Biden nationally, and then when you get into the nitty-gritty and look specifically at the swing states, the states that are critical for Biden's victory, Biden's not performing well there either. And so this New York Times Siena College poll very likely looked at some of the swing states, but for the purposes of their recent reporting, they haven't put the data out yet. But it's likely that they will in coming days. Now, equally concerning for Biden is how unpopular he is among his own base of voters. In fact, he's so disliked that he's now even less popular than Donald Trump, something that honestly even I couldn't have predicted several months ago. And Trump is still pretty unpopular, okay, unpopular as he was 4 years ago. So it's not that Trump has necessarily increased his support, although he has among certain demographics slightly. It's that Biden is so unfavorable among Democratic voters and, quite frankly, independent voters, who are the kingmakers in elections oftentimes, that he's really struggling in the results of these polls. So let's get to some of the other results from the New York Times Siena College poll. Let's put up this graph which shows you some of those results. So for instance, in October of 2020, Biden had a 52% favorability rating. Now he's down to 38%, while Trump is still hovering at 44%. So again, it's not that Trump has increased his favorability, it's more about Biden decreasing his favorability. Now, it also tracks then that nearly half of Democratic voters said they do not think that Joe Biden should be the nominee. It's not that Joe Biden or the Democratic machine cares at all about what the voters think, but nonetheless, according to this poll, 46% said that he should be the candidate, while 45% said that he should not. So 1% more believe that he should be the candidate. But the fact that 45% say no, he should not, is definitely troubling news for the Biden campaign and for Democrats in the country. Now, the New York Times also found that Biden's support among non-white voters keeps sinking, something that we've been covering here at TYT quite often because it's a fascinating phenomenon, and I do think that it is a symptom of minority voters feeling either abandoned or taken for granted by Democratic presidential candidates. He, meaning Biden, held just a 49-39 lead among the group, even though non-white respondents who voted in the 2020 election said they backed Biden 69-21. Now, swing voters really did show up to help Biden win the election, the general election in 2020. And the New York Times Siena College poll finds that a huge portion of them do not plan to cast their ballots for him this time around. Only 83% of voters who say they chose Biden in 2020 plan to vote for him this year. Whereas 97% of voters who cast their ballots for Trump plan to do so again this year. So again, just to emphasize and reiterate the point I'm making, it's not so much about Trump increasing his support. It's more about Biden losing support. Biden's policies toward Israel clearly have something to do with the worsening of public opinion toward him, as well as some economic factors that voters are blaming on Biden, whether you think it's fair or not. Unfortunately for the Biden administration, he is in fact getting blamed for some of the economic frustrations that Americans are dealing with. You know, some of the sticky inflation that they're experiencing at grocery stores, that is definitely leading to some political consequences for Biden. Only 1 in 4 voters thinks the country is moving in the right direction. More than twice as many voters believe Biden's policies have personally hurt them as believe his policies have helped them. A majority of voters think the economy is in poor condition. And when it comes to basically assessing the cognitive abilities or capacity of these candidates, especially as they seek to serve as president of the United States, Donald Trump still comes out far ahead. So I know that Donald Trump has had his own gaffes, but the voters are looking at gaffes coming from both sides, and they're still punishing Biden, according to the polling, far more than they are Donald Trump. So let's take a look at the CBS News poll, because that kind of emphasizes what I'm talking about here. Only 26% of registered voters say Joe Biden has the mental and cognitive capabilities to be president. Only 26%, guys. That is a big deal. Now, Donald Trump's numbers don't look great either. I mean, if you just took them as they are on their own, but Trump still looks better than Biden, which is why he's not making headlines for his cognitive capacity as much as Biden is. So 43% say that Trump does, and 25% of voters are like, neither one of these guys has the mental fitness to be president of the United States. And look, I think that they're the most accurate. We're talking about 2 incredibly old candidates. And it doesn't matter which one of them ends up winning the general election. Either one of them is going to break a new record for oldest president, sitting president. And that's pretty depressing. Now, Americans overall are not happy to be enduring another Donald Trump, Joe Biden rematch, and I certainly fall in this category. But let's take another look at that CBS News poll, which found that 48% of registered voters described the rematch as negative, and 42% said depressing. I fall in the depressing category. And we've already seen, or we're already seeing, Biden's unpopularity play out at the ballot box. So recently, during the Michigan Democratic primary, more than 100,000 Democrats in that state opted to vote uncommitted rather than cast support for the sitting president. And that's a significant number of voters, considering the fact that Biden eked out a win in Michigan to the tune of 150,000 votes, a little over, but you get the picture. This is not looking good for Biden, and Biden needs to win Michigan. It's a critical state. Now, meanwhile, Trump looks to be smooth sailing in the primaries, although Nikki Haley did finally defeat him in the election in DC, the primary election in DC, receiving 63% of the vote to Trump's 33%. Trump's campaign issued a statement shortly after Haley's victory, sarcastically congratulating her on being named Queen of the Swamp by the lobbyists and DC insiders that want to protect the failed status quo. But make no mistake about it, if anyone is under the impression that Nikki Haley is gaining momentum, they would be mistaken. Polling from upcoming primary elections indicates that Donald Trump is still performing really well, even against Nikki Haley. And Super Tuesday, of course, is taking place this week. So we will be covering Super Tuesday here at TYT. Make sure you tune into our election coverage. Trump is poised to win many of those states, if not all of those states. And we will give you some in-depth coverage of that tomorrow during our primary coverage immediately after the main show.